My honor and my pleasure to introduce to you my friend, a brilliant entrepreneur, Trent True. What do you get when you cross an agency with a mysterious name and digital launches? Trent True serves creative entrepreneurs with a dedication to education, business development, and social impact. The experts who want to ignite their audience with reckless abandon and not waste time worrying about the mechanics that take them to the next level. Trent can help take care of all of it for you. Trent, I want to hand things over to you. Thank you for joining us today. It is a pleasure meeting you again. We met with the JVIC Collaborate event, which was phenomenal. Loved it. Met some brilliant entrepreneurs and continuously meeting more. So it's a pleasure to be here with you today. Could you start by giving us a brief summary of who you are and what is it that you love to do?
Thanks, Beth. Well, it's certainly a pleasure to be here with you today. As you mentioned, we got acquainted through JVIC Collaborate semi-recently, and that was certainly a very exciting event. I guess to kind of lead things off with the somewhat rhetorical question that, as you pointed out, my website, what do you get when you cross a sort of intriguing or mysterious sounding business with a launch or project idea that you're working on? The basis for that, for the name of my business, Gothic Scribe Studio, comes from the fact that I'm basically a lifelong writer and reader. And as a follower of Edgar Allan Poe, what I like to think of is there's a certain notion about not just someone from literature, but how that applies to the business world. That, there are a lot of things that get overlooked. And what people overlook about Edgar Allan Poe is they think of him as primarily just this writer of these, mysterious kind of spooky type, stories. But the reality is that he was also a poet, and he's not always primarily thought of as a poet. But when you read his poetry, you see that narratively, there's a little bit of a difference between the poetry and the short stories. He tended to write in this very elevated style. It was very colorful and very elevated. And what I think Poe offers us is the notion that we can take things, whatever they are, a business idea, whatever the case is, and we can make it elevated. So make it elevated for your audience, make it something aspirational. So that's what I think Poe offers us, is for somebody that we think of as supposedly had a very conflicted life. He spent much of his life in poverty. He died in these very mysterious circumstances in Baltimore, where he was possibly murdered. We'll never really know. He had very troubled relationships with his relatives. But again, as I say, his writing is very beautiful and very elevated. And that's what we should think of as, the positive. So that's what I think we should be aiming for as entrepreneurs, is something aspirational.
I totally agree. Focusing on the brilliance, not necessarily getting caught up in the details of the tragedy, right?
Right.
I know a little bit about Edgar Allan Poe, historical and brilliant, and has left us with beautiful pieces of writing, which is pretty amazing to be admired that much and have your work displayed so many years after your life is gone. Could you give me some insight on how you came about doing what you're doing and what led you to be where you are today?
As someone that has an interest in the notion of being creatively productive, I've been a writer for much of my life. I wasn't really what I would call necessarily a very, serious writer in the sense of, always having the interest, or the aim of being a published writer. Some folks do, and that's fine, but I've always enjoyed writing creatively as a way to just kind of, have an outlet in my life, that's my own, and where I can kind of bring things to life, with world building. I enjoy writing poetry. I enjoy writing what's called flash fiction, which is That means short stories that are typically like about 1,000 words or less. You can just read it very, very concisely. As someone that's been interested in the unseen side of things with creativity, like, well, how exactly does one go about the process of something like writing a manuscript or a short story collection? I've always been interested in process, but, fast forward to 2020, after having worked in the museum field for a little while and having worked in the library profession, where there was sort of that combined side of troubleshooting and introducing people to things and trying to make it engaging. COVID comes along, of course, in 2020, very abruptly, very unexpectedly. And I've been interested in doing copywriting and graphic design for a while because I'm also a photographer. And I'm also interested in collage and, digital illustration. So COVID kind of got me thinking, well, you know what, if you're not going to get serious about trying to make, a small business happen now, where we have all of these, disruptions going on, where people are now working from home much more commonly, you're probably not going to do it. I like problem solving. I like helping people. And that was really kind of what gave me the inspiration, to, as I say, get serious about it.
You're a man of many talents, and I'm a witness to that because I really, really appreciate how thorough you were. I had asked you to take a look at my website and what I was posting on social media. It just wasn't resonating with people. And you gave me a long, very detailed list of what I need to kind of fix that. And we'll talk a little bit more in detail about that later. But I just wanted to mention how impressed I was with how much time you took in it and how thorough you was. And I greatly appreciated that.
Definitely appreciate the compliment on the website and online assessment that I did. I don't really want to call it necessarily an audit, because I know that while a lot of people may think of these types of things in those terms, to me audit sounds a little heavy or a little serious. So, like I say, I like to keep things relatively non-serious. I'm also, like you say, I also tend to err on the side of being, very methodical.
Do a lot of things. You do photography, you do writing, you do web building. I mean, you do it all. So you kind of have to be methodical, I would think, in a sense, because you're coming at a lot of different angles to come up with your assessment. So that's awesome. When someone is looking to get some help from you and kind of collaborate all that they have built and their overall infrastructure online for their company, what does it look like to work with you? What's like a step-by-step process that you go through to help people?
What I like to do is I like to try to keep things, relatively open and relatively accessible to anybody that might be interested in working with me. So on my website, the main call to action is for someone to book a free 30-minute call with me. And during that 30 minutes, you're welcome to run by me, what exactly it is that you might be looking for, with tech stack or with ideas for a launch or, repurposing ideas. So, as I say, I like to keep things relatively, loose and relatively, non-serious. So during the 30 minutes, they can talk about, well, I've had this idea for a launch, but I just haven't really quite, been able to make it come together, or I've done this launch in the past and it didn't really quite go exactly the way that I would have liked. So is there a way that we might possibly be able to polish it up a little bit or tighten it up? So those are ideas that I really like talking about with someone. Or, do you have something on the back burner that you'd really like to kind of kick off? And if they're serious about working with me, then basically from there, after the 30-minute meet and greet, they would just kind of fill out an intake form. It would look a little bit like a Google Documents form. Like, here are 3 things specifically that I would like to try to get, the ice broken with. It might be graphics, for example. It might be something for a lead magnet for their website or their blog. Or it might be like, do you have some growth ideas? for a launch that I'd like to do. Where would I go from the launch? Do you think a mastermind? Do you think a course might be a good idea? And, we could talk about that.
Okay, and that actually spawned another question, because there are droves of people right now that are starting businesses online, whether it be a side gig or their main source of income, and everybody needs a funnel. So can you give me a little insight to what software do you use for funnels? Is it your own software? Do you use software that they choose? And why is it a better funnel than some of the other ones we see online?
Right. Funnels are kind of one of those things, like you say, we, in the business world, we tend to kind of sling around a lot of these terms and these jargon phrases, as you know, that sometimes are a little catchy and sometimes are maybe a little confusing. But, for me, the easiest way to think of a funnel is it's basically kind of like a chain of events that when you have a business, this is how you get clientele, this is how you get an audience, and this is how you kind of keep them inside the infrastructure of your business with engagement. For some people, that might be a newsletter. For some people, that might be operating, through social media or Facebook groups. And, those can work, successfully either way. But for me, with the software, it's basically all about trying to keep things simplified, not only for myself, but also for the person that I'm working with. Because as I'm sure you know, when you have to go to 4, 5, 6 different sources for something for a funnel, for example, a copywriter, a graphic designer, a web developer, someone that maybe, would do a social media audit, that's potentially hiring 4, 5, 6 different people. And that can get, really, really complex.
And expensive.
It can, yeah, absolutely. And then there's the whole matter of, well, how do I keep all of this integrated? So I kind of think of the way that I work as essentially kind of like a one-person production studio. I don't actually use a lot of brand name software. For example, Photoshop. With photo editing, for example, I use lesser known programs. There's a photography editing website, for example, called ACD, which is a little bit less well known even among photographers. But as I say, it's it's not quite as complex and not quite as substantial to use as going through the workflow and all of the layers of Photoshop. So that's in terms of my work process, that's how I like to work. Is I like to keep things relatively less voluminous. There are graphics programs, for example, like Vistaprint and VistaCreate that I also like to use, rather than someone being dependent on a subscription to Canva. If they want to keep using Canva, that's cool, but they don't have to.
Yeah, I love Canva myself. I'm like a Canva junkie, but I've used Vistaprint as well, and both are great. So I can appreciate the fact that you're resourceful, you keep things simple so that you are able to wear a lot of different hats and cover a lot of different areas. So somebody doesn't have to, like you said, hire a photographer over here, a copywriter over there, a web designer over there. You can you have an umbrella that you work under and you can do it all, which is amazing, which can really save not only time for people, but a ton of money. I'm going to have your contact information on my blog page so that people can reach you through my blog. When they reach out to you, will we be including your calendar link on that blog so they could make appointments with you, or should they just call you or reach out to you on social media?
Yeah, on my primary website, which is based on a platform called Heights, there are a couple of sections, including one close to the top, give them an opportunity to book a 30-minute meet and greet call with me. So for me, that's always really the most efficient way, for somebody to reach out to me. There's also a link toward the bottom for LinkedIn, because as I like to say, sort of jokingly, but not quite so jokingly, I like to consider myself a LinkedIn guy. I love the LinkedIn platform, and for me, it's a very, very simplified, again, coming back to that notion, way of, staying in touch with somebody. That way you don't have to kind of, go burrowing through, a thread of emails or thinking like, oh, wait a second, that one might have ended up in spam, or I'm not sure I actually saw that. Yeah, everything's in one compact place.
Yeah, I totally love using LinkedIn. I meet new people on there every day. I'm a new entrepreneur, so LinkedIn gives me a plethora of brilliant minds that I can meet and learn from. And like you said, it's so much easier to contact that way because my email gets blown up. It's hard to find stuff. And, sometimes you get a little behind if you're doing other things. Anyways, yes, LinkedIn is the best.
Right, as I'm sure you realize, with your postings, which you are pretty, consistent with, on your thread for kind of getting, some visibility to topics that you like to talk about. For example, with people realigning their lives and, dealing with all these disruptions and all of these transitions, that keep coming at us left and right. We've been, we're still going through the pandemic. We've got other trends and patterns happening, like the Great Resignation, for example, which, as are affecting a lot of people professionally and their goals, with where they want to transition in their life. It's a really great resource also for just, seeing what are on people's minds, with these things, with trends.
Yeah, it's a great learning tool, networking tool. LinkedIn's got it all. Love it. So, well, it was a great interview. I love talking with you, and we're going to talk a little bit more about your assessment for my stuff here in a minute. But is there anything else that you want to add?
I guess just kind of in closing, that the invitation that I would like to make to other entrepreneurs is that, don't let yourself fall prey to the notion that, you have to do everything in your business because, you can't and you shouldn't. But at the same time, don't fall prey also to the notion that just because you're going to need certain assets that are tech related, that you let that deter you from reaching out to someone that, can simplify things for you and kind of take the overwhelm off the table for you. Because you're not doing yourself any favors by, giving into misconceptions. You like to help people, overcome obstacles in their life and with mindset and with, going in different directions with, their professional goals. And with me, it's kind of the same notion, as I say, just don't give into the notion, or don't give into the misperception that, if I go in this direction, that it's going to be something that's so overwhelming and so complex that I don't even know where to start. Just start with the basics, and, that's how you break the ice. Do things one step at a time.
Format an action plan. Put one foot in front of the other.
One quick win at a time, right?
Right. Well, we didn't learn how to walk the first time we tried. So why do we think that we can build a business overnight the first time we try? So there is no failure unless you just quit.
Right. And, in the projects that I've worked on during this year, for example, a book launch, which took place during January and February for a best-selling author, even though we did that in a very concise amount of time, 2 weeks, the same principles apply. It's okay, now that we've got this, let's just move on to the next stage. Look at things in kind of like a checklist kind of mode, but that's how you get things done, just one layer at a time.
Exactly. Well, it has been a pleasure to talk to you, and thank you so much for your wisdom and the opportunity to meet today. And for those of you who are listening, thank you for tuning in. This is my interview with Trent True. His website, Gothic Scribe Studio.heightsplatform.com. Please visit check it out. This could be a really valuable resource that will save you money and save you tons of time. So thank you, Trent, and till next time.
Thanks very much, Beth.